I've been keeping a close eye on some preachers lately. When Trump was at his strongest and democracy was at its weakest, they were pouring gas on the fire. One of the preachers I've been watching is named Johnny Enlow. You may have heard of him from my podcast. I talk about him a lot on there. But the crazy shit he says provides hours of entertainment. So let's take a look at this guy, see exactly who he is and what he stands for. Let's get into it. Johnny Enlow is famous for the crazy conspiracies he buys into and preaches to his congregation, like the idea that God is using Trump to reshape America. And he's so important to God's prophecies that we're going to start using the terms before Trump and after Trump, or BT and AT, rather than BC and AD.
And in the vision, I see this circular mountain that goes up, and there's a path all the way up. And at the top is Donald Trump, and he's on a motorcycle. And so I was like, Lord, as I'm saying that, the first thing he said is, he is going to save you from things you don't know you need to be saved from yet. This time in the presidency is going to be a hinge of the ages. And you'd be known as before Trump and after Trump because of the way I'm going to use him.
He's what's called a Dominionist. To understand who this guy is, we have to break down Dominionism. Most people probably don't realize that there's a name for what this is, but you'll recognize it as soon as I explain. It started as a fringe evangelical group in the 1970s. I would call it a mostly decentralized cult, but it has tenets and beliefs attached to it, and there are leaders that take on the beliefs and become leaders within the group. So the belief system itself is more of a manifesto on how to form out small cults. It is the evangelical movement. There are other offshoots of it too. One of the offshoots is called Seven Mountains Dominionism. We'll get into that in a minute. Dominionism is the idea that the founding fathers, Ben Franklin, Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, they never believed in separation of church and state, despite the fact that they put it right in the Constitution. The Establishment Clause says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. They twist it around to mean something other than what it obviously means. It means the government shouldn't be involved in religion, right? Well, apparently that wasn't clear enough. One of the people who helped write the damn thing, President Thomas Jefferson, was asked to clarify what he meant. Danbury Baptist wrote a letter to him that basically said that they weren't sure what it meant. They said the laws they lived under pre-revolution outlined religion as a privilege to be taken away at any time, rather than an inalienable right. They wanted to make sure that the government wouldn't get involved in religion in any way because that ended badly for them before. By the way, if you're interested in reading the letters between Jefferson and the Danbury Baptists, I put a link in the description. It can also be found on the Library of Congress website. Anyways, President Thomas Jefferson responded. He said, quote, "The legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that the act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. Adhering to this expression of the supreme will of the nation in behalf of the rights of conscience, I shall see with sincere satisfaction the progress of those sentiments which tend to restore to man all his natural rights, convinced he has no natural right in opposition to his social duties." End quote. And with that, not only was it in the Constitution, but the person who wrote it clarified exactly what he meant. He knew that when religion gets all gummed up in government, it causes suffering. Every time. America was created in large part by people who were trying to escape religious persecution. This whole issue couldn't be more clear. We don't need a Supreme Court to figure out what the Founding Fathers meant. They told us themselves exactly what they meant, which is why I find it so interesting that Dominionists like to pretend they have no idea what the Constitution means when it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Listen to this clip from Robert Jeffress on the subject.
Well, first of all, there is no separation clause. It doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution. There's no such thing as a separation of church and state in the Constitution. What the First Amendment says is Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
completely ignoring the clarification Thomas Jefferson offered to the Danbury Baptists. That's where the term separation of church and state came from, the letter. People quote that term because it was specifically written out and clarified by the guy who wrote it. So needless to say, Robert Jeffress is a Dominionist. And this is a perfect example of Dominionist logic. It's an extremist sect that believes religion and government should be indistinguishable from each other. They believe the government should be run entirely by their religious sect, and they're almost succeeding. Mike Pence, for example, is a Dominionist. They've had people in the White House, Congress, and the Supreme Court for decades. As I said before, the cult really started to form and grow in the 1970s, and ever since then, they've done their best to make sure they hold as much political power as possible. Dominionism can be split into soft variation and hard variation. The soft version believes they should control the government and force their specific version of religious belief on other people. The hard version of Dominionism doesn't just want to integrate religion and government together. It wants to replace the Constitution with a system based on Old Testament law. It's also called Christian Reconstructionism. Jeffress was defending soft Dominionism there, but I get the feeling he would be willing to go as far as hard Dominionism if he had the opportunity. Anyways, that brings us back to Johnny Enlow. He's a hard Dominionist. And not only that, but he believes in something called Seven Mountains Dominionism. That goes beyond having an ultra-Christian government based on laws from the Old Testament. Seven Mountains Dominionists believe Christians should control the educational system too. Not just having laws based on the Old Testament, they also teach the Bible as factual history. All history classes are based around it. There are massive lobbying groups and lots of powerful money behind this. In fact, that whole 1776 project, Trump's Patriotic Education Initiative, that had lots of Dominionist influence in it. That should be pretty fucking scary. Seriously. By the way, I just want to mention something before we continue. If you like the work I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you should check out my Patreon. If you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Etsy shop. I sell all kinds of cool stuff on there. I have game and controller stands for every system from the Atari 2600 to the Super Nintendo to the PlayStation 4, so give it a look if you're interested. I also sell shirts, stickers, mugs, and a bunch of other stuff on my Teespring, so give that a look too. Links are in the description and the pinned comment. Okay, now let's continue with Johnny Enlow. So if you remember back in 2019, Johnny Enlow mixed Trump into the Dominionist belief system. He said Trump was going to be used by God. Actually, he said God revealed it to him in a vision.
Your nation will be known as before Trump and after Trump. And he said the nations will be known as before Trump, after Trump. And the Lord, it was like, he said, I'm really not interested in your all's vote this time. I'm doing it. I usually give you all that option. This time I'm not. This is a rescue operation from heaven. This is a moment of the ages. This will go down. This time period will go down as a before and after AD, but BC, AD, depending on what terminology you use now.
Remember, this clip is from 2019, right when the political campaigns were revving up. So why should we trust this guy? He's a nutbag, right? Well, aside from the fact that he has a massive congregation and is very well known, he's a thought leader in the evangelical movement, the Dominionist movement. He's written books about this. People believe him to be a prophet. Listen to this clip.
Here's the deal. I don't call myself prophet. I don't put it on my website. I don't announce myself as Prophet Johnny. A lot of people do. And in fact, that's how I'm announced most. And when I'm contacted, when I'm called, when government leaders contact me, that's what they call me. And if you receive me as a prophet, I'm a prophet. If you don't, I'm not. If a prophet to you means, do I get everything 100% correct, including timing, nuance, everything, every detail? Absolutely not. So if that's your criteria for am I a prophet, then I'm not. So if I'm not, and I'm telling you, I go with that for you. Then you can't stone me either because I'm not a false prophet.
Wow, okay then. I guess he's trying to cover his bases, right? Doesn't want to be stoned or something. I guess that's something he genuinely worries about, running in the circles he runs. Remember, he's a Seven Mountains Dominionist. He wants the government to institute Old Testament laws. I guess the penalty for claiming to be a prophet when you aren't is a stoning. So that bit at the end kind of makes sense. And what about the members of government calling him and referring to him as a prophet? That's disturbing. Yeah, Ted Cruz's father is a Seven Mountains Dominionist too. I think I'm a little more cynical about Ted Cruz. I think he's too educated to believe in this stuff. I don't know. Don't attribute malice to that which could be attributed to stupidity, or something like that. Maybe Ted Cruz really is stupid and gullible, and that's why he's so in favor of Dominionist policy. Either way, Cruz isn't the only Dominionist in Congress. I'm sure Johnny Enlow gets calls from lots of members of government. Let's continue listening.
But I will tell you, for those who don't know, You know, I have met with the mayor and said there's soon going to be discovered in your city 2 salt mines, and it was discovered. I said there's going to be a silver mine discovered. It was discovered. There's going to be a zinc mine discovered. It was discovered. A lost city of the Incas is going to make world news. It was discovered. I was given 2 keys to the city in 2 subsequent trips. It's Mayor Luis Ordóñez from Saposoa. I have a diploma of honor from the Congress of Peru, and 6 congressmen were part of putting that together. And the only thing I've done in Peru is prophesy, and they've been fulfilled.
Well, the dude obviously fancies himself a prophet. I'm really not sure why he thinks God is helping him find ideal commercial locations for mining operations, but whatever. Not sure why God would even give a shit about that. But that's part of the belief system behind Dominionism. These people are nuts, and that would be bad enough on its own, but the fact that they're trying to control the government and educational system, they have billions of dollars behind them, and they actually have people in Congress, should scare the shit out of everybody. But there's more to this. I released a clip about Enlow on my podcast the other day. He was talking about a football game that he believed would predict if Trump would be president again. He said if he sees a 45 in the score between Alabama and Ohio, that means Trump will be president. So how'd the game turn out? The score was 52-24. Huh, no 45 in there anywhere. Except, oh wait a minute. If you flip the score around and take the dash out and put a circle in the middle, looks like we found the 45 in there somewhere, between the 2s. Seriously, does it get any crazier than this? Where is this dude's tinfoil hat? But there was more to the story than just bizarre claims about a football game. Give this a listen.
I told Elizabeth as the game begins, I said, I'm expecting the Crimson Tide to win this, and I'm expecting there to be a 45 in there, because the 45 would refer to President Trump, the 45th president. And also, again, back to the numbers, Isaiah 45 was about Cyrus, and there is the Cyrus anointing that has been on President Trump that he is not finished at all. We could not consider him having had the Cyrus anointing if he were done now, because he's just now called to get into the really serious part of the Cyrus anointing.
How about that? There's more to this prophecy. Sounds like they have an entire belief system built around Donald Trump and his role in God's plans. Why did they pick Trump? Why didn't they pick George Bush or Mitt Romney or John McCain as their prophecy-fulfilling guy? Because Trump has a cult following. He's a cult leader. Trump is the leader of his own little cult, what I'm calling Trumpist or Cult 45. But this is separate. This is an instance of an already existing cult adopting a leader into their existing theology. So what's all this about Cyrus and Isaiah 45? The Guardian did an expose on the whole belief system. Link is in the description. This gets a little complicated, but interestingly enough, it ties into Jehovah's Witnesses theology in some interesting ways too. So let me start from the beginning. The Bible describes a time when the Jews were driven out of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. They went to Babylon after that. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that happened in 607 BCE. Actually, it happened in 587 BCE, 20 years later. That's a linchpin of Jehovah's Witness belief, and if it did really happen in 587, which it did, we have hard evidence of that, it destroys a massive part of their belief system. Needless to say, religious belief and scientific knowledge about this era deviate from each other. According to Dominionists, in 539 BCE, Cyrus, the pagan Persian king, came to Babylon and returned the Jews to Jerusalem. The belief here is that Cyrus wasn't one of God's people, but he was used by God to fulfill his plan. Dominionists made the connection between Trump and Cyrus because the book of Isaiah chapter 45 describes the Cyrus event, and Trump is the 45th president of the US. That's more than enough for them, I guess. Anyways, Trump probably caught wind of the conspiracy because he actually quoted King Cyrus in an official White House statement a while back. That only solidified the belief. According to the Guardian article, quote, the earliest and most visible public proponent of the Cyrus connection was Lance Wallnau, a business consultant who has a doctorate in ministry, end quote. What the fuck is a doctorate in ministry? Where do you even get one of those? I assume it's from Liberty University or something. Anyways, back to the article. Quote, in 2016, before he met candidate Trump, the Lord spoke to Wallnau, telling him Donald Trump is a wrecking ball to the spirit of political correctness, end quote. Political correctness? I didn't know God gave a shit about that. Quote, before his second meeting with Trump a few months later, Wallnow saw an image of him as the 45th president and once again heard God speaking. Read Isaiah 45. End quote. If you remember, I did a video a while back about Pastor Mark Taylor. He played a significant role in this whole thing too. He deified Trump and claimed that God told him that he was going to use Trump to fulfill his purpose. Liberty U film students did a documentary-style video on Mark Taylor talking about his prophecy that God would use Trump, which is how he became known as the firefighter prophet. These people are beyond nuts, and there are a lot of them. There is a growing Dominionist movement within government. Back in the 80s, Jerry Falwell Sr. put a lot of time and effort into seamlessly intertwining religion and politics. He'd preach it from the pulpit, try to get his members to vote Republican at all costs. That's where it really started, and since then, there's been a steady stream of Dominionist cult members finding their way into government positions. Dominionism is the reason why religion and government are so mixed together, and they're doing their best to make them indistinguishable from each other. There's one other example that comes to mind when I hear ultra-conservative religious extremists trying to control the government. ISIS. That's what Dominionists are at their core. They are the Christian version of it. You thought Scientology having people in government was scary? This is something that should concern everybody.